The league continues to make big moves while the Leafs stay silent, but could that be changing as we approach the NHL draft? You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. It is the Draft Day Eve edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, and a couple of big trades have gone down over the last 24 hours in the NHL. The Maple Leafs did not get into either one of them, despite both players possibly could have filled the need. Both Evander Kane and JJ Peterka have been dealt, and Toronto didn't get any of them and still have yet to make a move early in the offseason. What's going on, Dave? How are we feeling about where things are at in the NHL and the Leafs being radio silent still when it comes to anything early this offseason?
Yeah, getting a lot of, hey, boys, let's break some news here. And I'm like,
trying. Oh, breaking news. The Toronto Maple Leafs did announce their 6-game preseason schedule today. They did get to send out a breaking news tweet. They announced a 6-game preseason schedule for next season. That is breaking news in Leafland. That's what we're talking. Not trades, not a trade. Preseason games. That's the type of news that Leafs PR gets to break.
Yeah, fascinating. So fascinating. Oh,
yeah.
It's like, really, we needed that preseason schedule now. I saw the tweet. I saw the notification of the tweet was coming. I'm like, oh, here we go. Really?
Yeah.
It just takes the winds out of your sails a little bit there.
Yeah, it does. And we can go over that a little bit later on in the show. We can detail the teams they're expected to play, and it could be the final time that we get a full 6-game schedule too. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But why don't we talk about the news of the day of the last 24 hours? The two big trades around the NHL, and the Maple Leafs not being in on either of them. So Evander Kane dealt from the Edmonton Oilers to the Vancouver Canucks for a 4th-round pick, and then JJ Peterka late last night dealt to the Utah Mammoth, the massive trade for Michael Kesselring and Josh Doan. No draft picks, no other top prospects included in the move, but JJ Peterka over to Utah, and it sounds as though a contract extension was also in place as part of this deal. I do not understand why the heck Buffalo decided, yeah, this is probably the best that we could get for Paterka. This feels like such a win for Utah.
Oh, a huge win. And I will say, for those that are wondering, why didn't the Leafs do this? Well, it appears that the Leafs had been in on Paterka trade talks, but he felt like they didn't have a package to offer. And I'm like, you sure about that?
You can't beat that pack. Like, look, Michael Kesselring, okay, he's a good player. He's a nice player. I think that he could, be a second pair defending, second pair defender. That's what Michael Kesselring is. He kind of blossomed this year into a top 4 guy. I'll give him credit for that. So you're getting a top 4 defenseman, and you're getting a young-ish prospect. No, he's pretty young. Josh Doan is a young player. Is he 21 years old, I think, 23. At this point? Oh, is he 23 already? Okay, so youngish prospect.
And he played mostly a 4th-line role this past year.
Mainly a 4th-line role this past season.
It was an AHL, mostly in the AHL too. So
you're telling me that the Maple Leafs couldn't have offered a top 4 player and like a top 9 winger? The Leafs couldn't have beat that, right? Like Brandon Carlo, there's talks about maybe Brandon Carlo being available if the Leafs could upgrade their offense. Well, that would be a good upgrade, right? Like maybe not for Evander Kane because there's a lot of baggage with that one. Maybe don't want to bring that in. However, he does bring that type of tenacity that this team solely lacks, so we'll say that. But JJ Peterka is a good player, and maybe Buffalo didn't want to deal within their division, didn't want to have to deal with Paterka for years to come, so they sent him westward. That very well could be part of the situation. But you're telling me that like a Brandon Carlo and another, prospect of some kind couldn't have got this done? Like they own a second-round pick in the draft tomorrow night. Tell me Brandon Carlo and a second-round pick couldn't have beaten Michael Kesselring and Josh Doan? I don't know. I think that the Leafs had the assets, but I think probably more so Buffalo just wanted to get Paterka out of the division more than anything.
And not only that, if you're going to deal him to a rival, you're going to ask for a pretty good chunk of change, right, to deal him within your own division.
Yeah. They probably would have asked for Danford, probably would have asked for Cowan, and that would have been a swift no. But
on top of that, we have news that Paterka signed an extension.
Yeah.
5 years, $7.7 million per year.
That's a pretty good deal. That's a pretty good deal for both Paterka and for Utah. And I think that 5 years will take him up to UFA status. So, they didn't have to buy up, many UFA years. So 7.7 for a guy who had 68 points last year in a
27 goals. Yeah. So
tough season for the Buffalo Sabres. But JJ Peterka, 2 straight years where he's kind of leveled up and become a top 6 winger in the NHL. I think he'll fit in perfectly. He kind of lines up with that age group that Utah is building. I think they're looking to take that next step, and maybe Paterka could get them there. But from Buffalo's perspective, I don't know how they couldn't have possibly got a better package, especially if it came with an extension. If there was no extension in place, okay, maybe I could understand. But if there was an extension already in place before this trade got dealt, which there was, how do you not hold out and get more? Wait until the draft night. You don't have to make the trade at 11 o'clock tonight. You could have waited 24 hours, hang your feet to the fire, and make them add something else on top of it. They have so many picks and prospects, and the best one you were able to get was Josh Doan. I don't know, man. Buffalo, oh, God. This Buffalo Sabres team, man, they just continue to
they undervalue all their trade assets.
All the time. Like Sam Reinhart, they got a second-round pick, and Devin Levi for Sam Reinhart. He went on to be, a 50-goal scorer and 2-time Stanley Cup champion after that. And they got a second and Devin Levi, who has not turned out to be the goaltending prospect expected him to be.
I think it was a first, but it wasn't like a very good first.
I could have swore it was like a day 2 trade. Sam Reinhart trade to Florida. It's semantics, but okay, it was a first-round pick. I apologize. You're right. It was a first-round pick. It was a late first.
Yeah, it was a late first, which I'm just trying. Was it Kulich? Yuri Kulich?
They ended up getting Yuri Kulich with the deal. So they did end up getting
it's not 50-plus goal scorer that Sam Reinhart. It's not guy who has gone on to win 2 cups and has been an integral part of the Panthers. I'll say that. Right?
No.
There was that one. Even their most recent trade, Dylan Cousins, and they get Josh Norris, and
who can't stay healthy.
Can't stay healthy, right? And not really much else after that.
Like Jacob Bernard-Docker, I think, was in that deal.
Yeah.
It's got to be tough to be a Sabres fan. That I can assure you. It has to be difficult to be a Sabres fan. That's a tough one. And I wonder if this is just the start of like Sabres rebuild 3.0. If they're moving on from Paterka, the problem is they didn't really get any, rebuilding assets, right? Getting Kesselring and Josh Doan. These are NHLers right now. So that's not even what that suggests to me. Now, I will say, for Buffalo's sake, the reason why they moved on from him, there was a lot of reporting that Paterka did not want to re-sign in Buffalo. He was not going to re-sign. So they either got him, traded him at some point, or he was going to walk as a free agent next year. Well, now he's able to go to a different team and get something for it. At least they got something for him, unlike what Toronto usually does with their young, talented players where they just let them walk for nothing. Mitch Marner, Zach Hyman, the list goes on and on. But, obviously a couple of big moves. The Evander Kane trade, too, I thought was very interesting.
Yeah.
We talked about it a week ago about like, would Toronto be interested? There was thought that the Oilers, they want to open up some cap space, could be dumping Evander Kane, and they essentially did. They traded him for a 4th-round pick to the Vancouver Canucks, so he goes home to Vancouver. But Evander Kane's an interesting player. Like, when healthy and when he's engaged, he could be very effective. Like 2 years ago when the Oilers made that run to the conference finals, even last year when they went to the Stanley Cup final, not this past season, but the one before, like Evander Kane, very instrumental part of that top 6 of that Oilers offense. So I think the Canucks did okay here. It'll be interesting. Like maybe if whatever the Canucks are out of it to have a playoff spot, they can retain and flip him at the deadline. But that was another player where it was like, could the Leafs have got in there? Like $5 million for Evander Kane as a potential top 6 winger. You need one in Toronto desperately. Especially if Mitch Marner leaves, you've always had one hole on the wings. Like now you kind of have 2 holes on your wings. You could have used them, and if it only cost a 4th-round pick, that could have been another one that maybe Toronto could have kind of puckered up and paid the price on.
Yeah, I mean there's moves to be made. Even the Mason Marchment one for me too was like it was a 3rd and a 6th. What are we talking?
You keep hearing that they're in on these deals, but they're never willing to actually pull the trigger. And I just don't understand why, because now they're going to go out and spend that same amount of money on guys in free agency that might not be worth it. Like Mason Marchment's a pretty good player. Like there's not a lot of guys who are better than Mason Marchment who are going to be available in free agency. That fill the need.
And that's what he's being paid is what, $4.5 million?
Yeah, you're gonna have to pay guys more than that to come to Toronto. Realistically, if you're looking for a middle 6 winger, most likely, even like Mangiapane, he's coming off a 14-goal year, but there's talks that guy could cost you upwards of $4 million a year, if he signs a multi-year deal. Well, he scored 14. Marchment had 20-something goals this year. He scored over 50 points in back-to-back seasons. Like you probably would have rather that. And it would only cost you, a couple of mid-round picks or even Evander Kane or JJ Peterka. But no, Toronto sitting on their hands, not making a whole lot of progress, not making any deals of the trade variety. However, there does seem to be some movement on their own players. Darren Dreger today had an update on John Tavares and Matthew Knies. Let's come back and get into that. And let's get into some draft talk. Let's talk about Toronto's needs. Just 24 hours away from the NHL draft now, or I guess a little longer than that. We're 1 day away from the draft. Let's talk about their biggest needs and what draft capital the Leafs do possess, albeit not a whole lot. But there are some picks in the arsenal. So we'll get to all that and more later on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
Today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing money, you're building wealth. And, for me, I think what I appreciate most about the Monarch Money app is that I can track all my accounts in one place. I can see which subscriptions are paying for, which ones maybe I don't really need. It's all convenient. I'm all about convenience. So if you're looking for something that keeps it all in one place, you don't have to go searching through multiple apps, then make sure you go and you check out Monarch Money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you. It is the eve of the NHL draft. Lots of moving and shaking going on around the league. The Maple Leafs kind of silent to this point in the offseason. They haven't re-signed any of their pending UFAs. They have not sent out their qualifying offers, no RFA extensions. but it sounds like they could be getting close on a couple of big deals. Dave, what's the latest on Tavares and Matthew Knies?
Yeah, so Darren Drager, was on a couple of shows, Overdrive and Insider Trading, and it looks like that progress has been made on deals for both extensions for both Knies and Tavares, which we had heard a few days ago that there's still quite a bit of, distance apart. I guess there was a gap, little gap between the two. Well, now it's sounding like things are moving in a more positive direction with those ones.
Which is good, because I think when you look at the moves that have been made around the league, the retentions of some of the other centers around the NHL, Duchesne signing, Brock Nelson signing, you expect Sam Bennett to stay in Florida. There's not a lot of options to replace John Tavares in the open market. You might as well bring back the guy can play your system and give you quality minutes. So it makes a lot of sense to me now, if you have to, quote unquote, bend the knee a little bit and maybe move off that smaller number they were hoping to get Tavares at, kick that up a wee little bit. I still think Tavares is interested in taking a little less than he would on the open market. Maybe it's not a crazy amount less. There was that report from who was it yesterday we were reading, the fourth period.
David
Pagnotta. There was a report that the initial offer was like sub $4 million on a long-term deal, which doesn't seem like that's what Tavares is interested in. That seemed like a bit of a slap to the face. But if he can get it up into the fives, high fives on a 4 or 5 year deal, or maybe a low fives on a 6 year deal, maybe that's what gets this thing done. Or maybe get to high fours on a 6 year deal. Maybe that's what gets this thing across the finish line. But apparently that is the focus currently for the Maple Leafs leading into the NHL draft. They don't have a first round pick, so it's not like they got to focus and worry about night one of the NHL draft. They don't have a first round pick, and I don't see them trading into the first round either. So, it sounds as though their priority heading into the draft is to try and get John Tavares and Matthew Knies locked into an extension. And then once that's done, they know exactly how much money they'll have for free agency. So that makes a lot of sense. I hope they can get it done soon.
Yeah. And actually I'm getting asked a question in the Discord literally as we're recording. So why not bring it up on the podcast? Because It is talking about Knies and not more so Knies. How does the contract for Paterka stack up as a comparable for Matthew Knies?
It's a good question. That is a good question.
That is from Blue 13.
For Blue 13, shout out, always a strong contributor to the Discord. Part of every year has been part of our fantasy hockey league as well. So shout out to Blue 13. Let's take a look at Paterka's numbers, I suppose. I know he's had 2 straight big seasons. The problem is Paterka's a little further along. I should do the same age, both 23 years old.
Both second round picks too.
Both second round picks and had very. You know what? This could be a decent comparable for Matthew Knies, because in Paterka's second season, he put up 28 goals and 50 points. That's very comparable to Matthew Knies. He had 29 goals and 50-something points, 56 points, if I'm not mistaken, in his second season. And then Paterka did follow it up with another big year, 27 goals and 68 points in 77 games, in what was a tumultuous season for Buffalo. Wouldn't surprise me if that pretty well led. Yeah, that was second on the team behind Tage Thompson in points with 68. Alex Tuch had 36 goals last year, actually. Another player to watch coming up in this draft, Alex Tuch. That is someone maybe Toronto should be eyeing, by the way, if they're looking for some good power forwards on the right side. But anyway, yeah, I think that's actually a really good comparable. I think you could definitely look at JJ Peterka and think that might be a decent kind of starting point for Matthew Knies and what you should be expecting. Somewhere in and around 7.7 to 8 million on a longer term deal. That to me makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of maybe the benefit of having a deal like this happen. It can either, sometimes they can either, now we got to pay a little more because the comparable guy just got more. Or in this case, Paterka is probably a better offensive player. Matthew and I can say, well, I'm a better defensive player. So in a way, I feel like maybe they cancel each other out a little bit there. And so I think this is a pretty good comparable, and hopefully now maybe that sparks a little more. Maybe the agent for Matthew and I says, okay, we got our number here. Let's push for it. And maybe if you're the Leafs, you say, all right, how close can we get it to this deal, guys?
Right. That's exactly what you're going to try and do. All right, what can we do? We want a little bit more than what Paterka got. I don't know what the tax situation is in Utah. Maybe they've got a little bit of a lower income tax threshold, which also could, be a reason why it was 7.7 instead of 8 million. They also have, their internal cap there where it's like, well, you're not going to make more than this guy, but here is what we're willing to offer you. And he took it. So there's going to be more external factors that are obviously in play than just straight up looking at the numbers. But I think that's about the range. Yeah, between 7 and 8, maybe you could stretch to 8.2, like somewhere within that $500,000 ballpark of like 7.7 to 8.2 on a long-term deal. Short-term deal, it's going to be less. It has to be less. You can't go 8 times 3. There's no way that Maple Leafs should be doing something like that. But if you can get them assigned to 6, 7, 8 years, makes sense to me to lock him in and around, maybe a touch higher than what Paterka's number just came at. And it sounds like, again, progress was made toward a deal today with both of those players, including Matthew Knies. So perhaps seeing this comp could maybe be what gets it over the line, where it's like, look, this is what players of your ilk, top 6 forwards of your ilk are going for. Let's just get this done. So, I think that's a very astute comment there from Blue 13. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about the NHL draft. It's tomorrow night. The Leafs have 6 draft picks, none in the first round. We'll detail what picks they have and what happened to the original picks that they had in the draft as well. Very interesting kind of trade path to how they basically no longer have a lot of their top picks. We'll get to all that more next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is the next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. On average, in 15 minutes, effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. I love that it's completely online. Rugiet connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL and use the code LockedOnNHL to get 15% off today. It's Rugiet.com, Rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL. Use the promo code LockedOnNHL to get 15% off. Individual results may vary. Prescription treatment, compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. The Locked On Leafs podcast continues. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you, as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and also up on YouTube as well. We're on our road to 10K. So still need a bunch more subscribers to get there. And once we do, we'll be giving away Maple Leafs jerseys. So sub up if you haven't already. And thank you to our everydayers who do come listen and tune in each and every day here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. The season's over, but we do keep it going through the off season all summer long. It's all Leafs all the time. And the Maple Leafs do not have a whole lot of draft capital for tomorrow night's NHL draft. They currently have 6 picks in the draft. What they do have is a second-round pick, which is not their own. It's Florida's second-round pick. They have Colorado's third-round pick. They have their own fifth-round pick, Pittsburgh's fifth-round pick, their own sixth, and their own seventh. So not a whole lot of high draft capital. Not having their first-round pick kind of bites. That was traded away in the Jake McCabe trade a couple of years back. I actually went through to find out how they lost all of their draft picks. Do you remember how they lost this year's second-round pick, Dave?
How did they lose?
What trade was this year's second-round pick involved in?
Oh, man, it was a few years ago, too. I don't even think the team was actually. I think it was a former team. I think it wasn't it Arizona?
What are you gonna? What's the
What's
trade?
What was the trade? Man, I'm not remembering a trade that they made with Arizona. There are not many trades. That's the other thing.
This draft pick was coupled alongside one Nick Ritchie.
Oh no!
Sent to Arizona for Ilya Lyubushkin the first time around. The first time. That's how long ago this draft pick was traded. The first time.
And then they got Zingles too.
Yeah, and then he got claimed off waivers the very next day. It was Lyubushkin and Ryan Dzingel, and Dzingel got claimed the very next day. But yeah, this is a draft pick that was traded away like 3 years ago. And now, payment comes due. And again, that was a deal that was made by Kyle Dubas. This is not of the fault of, Brad Treliving. Same with the first round pick trade in the McCabe deal, also traded away by Kyle Dubas. But the third round pick that the Maple Leafs traded away was done by Brad Treliving. That was traded away last year at the deadline when they acquired Ilya Lyubushkin from Anaheim. They had to trade him. I think the third round pick was traded in order to get retention on Lyubushkin. So that's how they lost their third rounder this year. And then their fourth round pick, they also don't have, Dave. Do you remember how they lost their fourth round pick this year?
Was that for Connor Dewar?
No, it was traded to Minnesota. They were they're
the second team. Yeah. Retained for who was it?
Ryan O'Reilly.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
They retained 50% of Ryan O'Reilly's deal and then flipped him to Toronto. And Toronto gave them a fourth round pick for doing so to get his cap hit in half, I guess in quarters essentially, because I think St. Louis retained half of it as well. So, yeah, this year's first, second, third, and fourth round picks all traded away over the course of the last few years. And they don't have their own selection until the fifth round, but they have their fifth, sixth, and seventh. They acquired another fifth rounder this past deadline when they traded away Connor Dewar and Connor Timmins to Pittsburgh. And then they got a third round pick in the Liljegren trade. And then obviously last year they traded out of the second round and picked up a 2025 second rounder from Florida. And that's how they ended up with this year's last pick in the second round. And that's the draft capital that the Maple Leafs have. So 1 second, a third, 2 fifths, a sixth, and a seventh.
Yeah, it's a lot of trades. It's crazy. Like that 2023 season where they just literally did
all in move.
The Shen deal, the Ryan O'Reilly deal, the Jake McCabe. I was like, holy boy, did they put a lot down on that year. And then
Eric Gustafsson was brought in. Did they trade for a goalie too? They might have even traded for a third goalie at some point as well. I remember it was the last year that I was doing Leafs Lunch, and I think they turned over a third of their lineup, a full third of their lineup at the deadline. It was insane, the amount of a movement that was made, right? Rasmus Sandin was traded for like a first-round pick, and there was a lot of trades that that were done at that deadline. Pierre Engvall went out the door. They traded a bunch of prospects. Yeah, that was a crazy trade deadline for the Maple Leafs, and came up short. Unfortunately, that was the first year they lost to Florida, but that was the year that they won a round. They did win a round that year for the first time in 20 years. So whether or not that was worth it, I don't know. You could be the judge. I'm sure at the time you thought, yes, it was worth it. But right now, I guess you're looking back, you're like, what good was it? We won 5 games in the postseason that year. Was it worth losing all this draft and prospect capital? Maybe in hindsight, not as much.
Well, that's it, right? Like it's always hindsight, plays a big part in a lot of these deals, but it's also like, were they in a position to go all in? Like you can only do it so many times, right? And again, how many of those trades involve? We talked about this yesterday. How many of those trades involve draft picks rather than involving any player? Or the only one really was like the Pierre Engvall one, right? Where you got rid of Engvall and you brought in a pick. Like you'd
Sandin. That did the
yeah,
same
sorry, and
thing.
Sandin too, because you got a pick and a like. But that's it, right? Like trade some of the stuff you had within your own roster that's just not working, or even a prospect or two that maybe has a little bit of value that maybe if you convince a team to take on, you're not taking the chance that maybe one day that prospect's not going to really turn into what you want it to be, which has happened how many times, the last few years where, we thought this guy was going to be a half decent prospect and it didn't work out. Right.
Yeah. So, they brought Nola Chari in that deal as well with Ryan O'Reilly.
That's right. I do remember that.
Yeah. And they gave
Dubas loved the Chari. I'll tell you that, because he gave him a nice contract in Pittsburgh after that.
Yeah, he did. He got himself a very nice contract. But essentially, it cost them, he gave up a first, a second, a third, and then they gave up a fourth to Minnesota to retain another bunch of Ryan O'Reilly's salary, Abramov and Adam Gaudette. So they didn't give up much in prospect capital, but man, did they give up a lot of picks for O'Reilly and Achari. And that's a big reason why they don't have much of a war chest at all when it comes to picks and prospects. And again, Jake McCabe, same thing. They gave up a first and second round pick, and like this year's first and next year's second is not here because of the Jake McCabe trade. Like a trade that happens in 2023 will impact the Maple Leafs draft in 2026. Like it's crazy at the time when you think like, yeah, it's not too bad, I suppose, that you're making, these deals, trading away picks in the future. Like that's someone else's problem down the road. Well, we've gotten there. Now it's like, is it really worth it? McCabe, I'd say it was. I still like the McCabe trade. I still think that he's a solid player for the Maple Leafs, and that also got them a third-round pick as well in the trade. But so that's where the Maple Leafs are at. We'll see what they can do in terms of, it's weird because when you're picking that low in the draft, like your first pick is the last pick in the second round, it's tough to like have targets, right? Like guys that, like last year, we had a bunch of guys who we were like, hey, these would be great players for the Maple Leafs to select in the first round. And, we had a bunch of names out there, and it doesn't work the same when it's a late second round pick it could be anyone. Like it's always from picks 30 to like 80. They're all very similar players and similar skill sets and similar evaluations. It's just, what do you prefer? And that's what it kind of will come down to. I guess the only question I'll ask you is, Dave, when you're going into this draft, and keep in mind, the Maple Leafs do have a brand new head of
scouting.
So we'll see. He came from the Dallas Stars, who has had a lot of very good, successful draft years under his tutelage. So we'll see what he can do with this group with, not a whole lot of draft picks. But where would you say the needs are for the Maple Leafs? Should they be focusing on a couple different is there a focus on any position groups, or is it more of just go best player available type of draft?
I mean, you could say best player available, but I think they're going to want to add some guys with a bit of like size especially down the middle. They don't really have a lot of that. Like Easton Cowan, really good player, not really big, right? Very skilled, but they just in my opinion they kind of lack that beefiness up front that I think that they really want to start developing and not having to go and trade or sign, right? Jacob Quillen, remember him and Luke Hames were two guys that they signed from the NCAA.
Yep.
Neither one are very like they're both 6'1", not really like I think that size that they really want to add up front. Like I think they for blue liners, you can always add defensemen, especially as a right shot. But again, it also comes down to what's the best available in those spots. I think the Leafs are in a position where they don't have to pick necessarily based on position. They kind of can take the best player that's available there, but I'm sure they're going to find someone that they really like, and I think that is going to be someone that has a little bit more of that size.
Yeah, I'd like them to get themselves a centerman. Like I think they need to just focus on adding and building out some center depth. Like they're, when they traded away Fraser Minton, like that was a big, kind of shot to their center depth that they had in their prospect pool. So if they could try and replace that, that'd be great. So that to me, it just depends on how the draft falls. If best player available is a really good defenseman that they like or a scoring winger, I mean, yeah, go there. Yeah, when you're that late in the draft, you kind of do just take best player available. But if Ty goes to the center, basically is how I would look at it if I were the Maple Leafs going into the draft, just because you do want to try and build out that center depth in your prospect pool. But we'll see. They got 6 picks. We'll see what they do with them. Once they're picked, it's up to the players to establish themselves as NHLers. We see all the time players who go late in drafts kind of sparkle and turn to studs. Matthew Knies was picked in the 50s, right? And this pick that the Maple Leafs have is pick 64. It's not that far off from where they were able to get Matthew Knies. It's less than 10 selections from where they got Matthew Knies. So it is possible, if you do your due diligence, do your scouting well, that you can still uncover gold mines later in drafts. Braden Point was a 3rd-round pick in NHL draft. Jake Gensel, 3rd-round pick. So there's lots of guys that you can get if you do due diligence and you scout well. So we'll see what the Leafs got in store. We'll come back tomorrow, and we'll talk a little bit more about the draft, a little bit more about some of the top prospects in this year's draft. And so we'll do that on tomorrow's show. I'm thinking I'm going to try and get a guest on, a draft analyst for tomorrow to kind of go through all of that with us. So that will do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs on Twitter and on Instagram. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.